Today's video is how to set up a buddy box for assisted flying. So let's get started. First process you want to do on the instructor transmitter is bind to the receiver on the airplane you want the buddy box. That's standard process, so we're going to go ahead and pretend that's already been done. Next, set up a blank model in your transmitter for the student. You notice I've changed the model name to instructor for the IX and student for the NX for the model. I've also went in and turned off the timer. Other than that, this has a blank profile that's been named student. When you're setting up a buddy box for assisted flying, you can use other IX, DX, and NX radios. First thing we want to do is go to model setup on the bottom center. Third tab down on the right says trainer. You have wired trainer, wireless trainer, and timer alerts. Wired trainer, you will need 2 additional components to make that connection work. It will give you a wired connection, so there's not any chance of interference. However, the wireless trainer I've always used because I've never had an issue, and you're not bound to the length of the cable. After we go over those, we'll go over trainer alerts. Let's click on wireless trainer. At the top, you see inhibit. Click on that and you have 2 options, programmable instructor, pilot link instructor. Pilot link instructor is the simplest because what you do is you just configure everything for the airplane on the instructor, and you can use the blank profile that I have set up on the student with the NX transmitter. So right now we could just go into pilot link instructor, bind them together, go ahead and fly, and everything's controlled as far as rates, gear, flaps, and throttle cut on our instructor radio. So let's click on pilot link instructor. Turn off RF. Turn off RF to access long press to proceed. Now if you're still bound up to the airplane and it's powered up, go ahead and power down the airplane. We're going to long hold proceed. And at the top we've got pilot link instructor. It will be set up so that you can go in here and use the default rates if you want, but we're going to go over the differences. So if you want to change these settings, switch I is the momentary switch at the top. When you push it down, you give the student control. When you let go, you have instant control as the instructor. You can change that to a switch if you want. However, I would be cautious. With a momentary switch, as soon as you let it go, you have control. A switch does take a little bit longer, and it's not as easy to spot because you can put that on any different switch that you want. However, if you are confident with the student that you're flying with that you will have time to make a recovery, or if the student you're flying with is used to flying planes, or maybe this is just a more advanced plane and they do know how to fly, likelihood of them getting in trouble maybe not as much, then you could put on a switch. Because one thing that is a downfall in having on momentary, when it is a long flight, you are holding the button for an extended period of time. Instructor override, I want to go over that just real quick. Be cautious of when you're using that, because what that does is whenever you move the controls, you instantly take control of the plane. So let's say you had the student take off the airplane and they were going to come in to land. Well, you get in a situation where you need to go full power and go around, or you need full power. When you first move this throttle control up, it's going to be at low throttle, so it's not going to be an instant power up. Same way as if you took it off for some reason and they're bringing the plane in and they're going to be at a low throttle, you're going to be at the very top of the throttle. When you take control and push it down, it's going to give an instant burst of power in a low speed situation, and you may not want that. So be careful when you do use instructor override. I want to go over all the features. However, that's one that I personally don't use, but you know what it's for. In the bottom center, we have bind button for the bind process. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll talk about the controls for pilot link instructor and how these radios work together in flight. So we're going to go ahead and push bind. Long press bind button to start bind mode. Once we do that, we're going to go over here and go to the bind section on the student transmitter and bind like we normally would with the receiver. We're just going to be binding from radio to radio. So hold down bind. Scroll in, go to bind. Yes. Bind.
Bind complete. DSMX 11 milliseconds.
Now we've set our connection between the instructor and student transmitters. You will notice at the bottom you have some toggle switches. Throttle, aileron, elevator, and rudder is all set up for student, so the student has control of all those. Gear and auxiliary and above, those are all set up for just the instructor. So let's say we're flying an airplane that's a normal configuration and just has the 4 controls. That works fine. The student has all the controls. Now you're flying a plane and you want to do the gear in auxiliary 1, which is normally flaps. You will use the buttons on the instructor to control those. The student won't have any control. Now, if you want to take away control of something for a situation, then all you do is push the button and toggle it to the other side. For example, if we want to give the student control of gear and flaps, you'd push the buttons on here and now they have control. Earlier I mentioned with Pilot Link Instructor, you don't need to set up anything over here that may be throttle cut unless you want to have the throttle cut just on the instructor. However, that does not apply when you set up gear and, for example, flaps. So if we enable the student for gear and flaps, you actually have to configure that in the student radio. So just keep that in mind. We're going to set this back to where it was before. So we just push the 2 toggle buttons. Now, last thing I want to talk about when you're in flight with this setup is the rates. The rates are controlled from the instructor transmitter. So if you set them on medium rates and you give the student control, they're going to be on medium rates. If you turn one to low or high, that's going to change it for the student, and you can do it while they have control. If you discuss that they have the controls are too sensitive, then you could turn it down to a lower setting, or if they're not enough, you could turn it up higher. Now let's go into programmable instructor at the top. Programmable instructor means you need to have both the transmitters completely configured for the airplane. You can do this manually by going through each setting and putting that in the student transmitter, or you could take the model, download it to the SD card, take it out, put it in the student transmitter, and upload the new model, and now the radios are automatically configured. Be careful for compatibility issues. For example, taking a file from an IX or an NX and trying to put it into a DX radio. Couple reasons why you would want to set up programmable instructor. One is, let's say you're, as an instructor, going to sign off on the student to fly by themselves. You already have the student radio program, so all you have to do is take the student radio and bind it to the receiver in the airplane, and now you're completely done with the setup, and all the controls and everything will carry over with this one being the primary radio. Second is if you want to have 2 different sets of rates. You want to have a set of rates for the instructor, and let's say the student, you want to have a set of rates that are toned down. So you could go in and set up different rates in the student transmitter so that the instructor has their own rates and the student has their own rates. Now let's go back to the previous menu, top left hand corner, and look at trainer alerts. Trainer alerts allows you to have audio call out from the radio. You can set these up to have different call outs if you like. You just go over here to the words, push the pencil button, and change it. It's text to speech, so you can have it say different audio call outs. Default, it says for the instructor control. When you push the button in, it says student control. When you let the button out, it will say instructor control. We'll go ahead and do that. So let's say I'm going to give the student control. I push the button in.
Student control.
I want to take control back as the instructor. I let it go, and it'll make that call out.
Instructor control.
If you push the button down and you get no student signal, that means the student transmitter is not bound to the instructor transmitter, or the radio's turned off. So either way it doesn't have connection, it'll let you know. If you want to turn any of these off, you can go over to the right and turn them off. You may prefer to turn the instructor and student call out off and do it verbally between you and the student. At the top right hand corner, you do have a volume button, so you can turn that down and try using the audio call out while you're in this menu if you want to lower the volume. So now that we went through everything, I want to show you one last step at the main screen, and that's the monitor. When you have the connection set up between an instructor and student transmitter, the controls will move on the monitor when the student gives input and has control. So I'm going to push the button in, it will say student control.
Student control.
I'm going to move the right stick on the student transmitter, and you will notice that the monitor will actually move on the instructor radio.
Instructor control.
So you can check on that screen, but also that's good when you're doing your surface control check. You can make sure that everything's working properly. When you give it elevator, it's elevator on the instructor radio. You give it aileron, it's aileron on the instructor radio.
Instructor control.
So now we've gone through the complete setup of Buddy Box for assisted flying. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, go ahead and push like on the video. If you want to see future videos, subscribe to the channel while you're here. I appreciate y'all watching, and we'll see you on the next one.